Hey guys, welcome back to Trekyards podcast. I'm Captain Foley.
And we're talking ships. Break from classics here.
Right. That's what we're about, is ships. Anyway, today we're going to be looking at, again, we're continuing our look at some of our favorite things as far as small categories go. Today we're looking at TNG villain ships.
Yes.
Which opens up quite a few possibilities.
Yes.
And I'm looking forward to seeing what we pick because...
Yeah, and this is when the lines get a little bit grey because a TMP era ship, we sort of said, well, okay, like the Curry class and the Centaur, even though you see them in later eras, they're of that era design because obviously it's kit bash the same pieces. You wouldn't build one looking like that 100 years later. But TNG, then there's drastically different style when you come to like Voyager because that's just, the show's evolved, they changed designs. And if you look at the Enterprise D era of ships, there's the Wolf 359 fleet, which is all the kit bash of the D. That's sort of the fleet. Same with the Nebula, but you wouldn't consider necessarily Prometheus TNG era, even though it is in a broader spectrum. It's so different, and so sort of for us, I think we're sort of categorizing. Then there's like the DS9 Voyager era, which includes things like Defiant and the shuttles, and then you've got like the First Contact era because they're 6 ships or 5 designed for one movie, and then there's those. Different categories. So this is like just TNG era, but something like the Negvar wouldn't count because that was designed in Deep Space Nine. So it's kind of like, because it's almost kind of like early TNG in a sense, because these are all sort of the famous ones that we're going to look at. So a little bit of grey area there, but we're disclaimering straight out of the gate there.
And it's interesting because I would have changed my view on the very first episode we did of this, the motion picture era ships. I would have picked the Janolan because I like the Janolan from Relics. But anyway.
No, Birth was a good one.
We are talking about TNG villains.
Well, antagonists. Because, some of them became friends and some of them... But they're also villains. Or freedom fighters, if you pick the Maquis Raider. Are you picking the Maquis Raider?
No. Who would pick the Maquis Raider? I'm going to have to go with the Romulan D'Deridex. Because it is uniquely a menacing ship. I mean, you see it compared to the Enterprise quite a few times. It was never really established, the sizing, but with the way they positioned the ships together, it looked at least 3 times the size of the Enterprise D. It looked like the Enterprise D could fly right through it. So it's just an interesting design.
Well, the E can fly through it. The D can't because it's very broad.
Too wide, yeah. But I'm just saying, early on, when we first saw it, it looked like it could fly through it because the way they had the camera angles and stuff. So you never really got a real sense of how big it was, but it was just big. And it was menacing looking. It was a new design, nothing we had seen before. It totally stepped aside from the Romulan aesthetics of TOS. And
I bet you would have hated that if you'd been watching it, season 1 episode of TNG, like, this is not a Romulan ship, it's not a Romulan at all. Should be white with little circle engines.
I'm sure a lot of people said that because just the internet wasn't around then, really, so that didn't get out.
Or would you have said, well, it's been 100 years, therefore they can do whatever the hell they want? I mean, seriously, what do you think you would have said? Because that's a long time for designs.
I would have said it's been 100 years, so
okay.
It could have changed for sure. And that's what I like about it. The fact that now they use the quantum singularity drive, which we don't learn right away, but that could be the reason for this unique design, this kind of ring-style ship. It's just a fantastic looking ship, very alien looking, very menacing looking, and definitely unique, visually unique. And it's its own thing. There's nothing that really looks like it.
Yeah.
So that's why it would be my favorite.
Yeah, it's special because it is sort of a joint number 1, or I guess then number 2 if we'll do different ones. But yeah, it is the bird, but it's also clearly a spaceship. Like it's not overborn of either. It is a great mix, and because of the large size, you get a sense for the windows, but also there's not too much that gives indication of scale on it. But the fact the windows are so small, the fact the tech is linked to such a small window, this is a big bulky ship, and it's difficult to even understand it, but it has a very certain presence. And I do even appreciate Andrew Probert's original version of it had more detail at the bottom, had cargo bays attached. There was more to it. They just couldn't fit it in time. It'd be nice to have seen that in the show. But it's certainly a rare breed of is a balance between so many different things, you know. And having done animations with it, it's actually surprisingly elegant, even though it's so big. As it flies, it's like graceful, even though it is so big. And most of the time, we don't say do a big ship, but really, it's actually got very low internal volume, relatively speaking, for its size, because it's 75% whole.
Yeah.
So it's
exactly.
It's big, but it's not actually like big. It's a.
But still, when you see them, the Enterprise and it face to face, as far as scaling goes, there's still a lot more internal volume in that head of that ship than I think.
Yes. Well, yes.
Well, not really a lot more, but probably the same amount. It's just the Enterprise is squished into a saucer shape. So
yeah, no, it's a weird ship to decipher, and it'll always have fired weapons out of the wrong port.
Yeah, but that's a story for another time.
Okay. Yes, and it would have been. I was sort of debating which was my number one, but since you took that, I'll sub to my other joint number one, because it is another one that is greater than the sum of its parts, I think. That's the Mucky Raider.
Okay. I was gonna say, I thought you looked disappointed when I said the Daredevil. Like, damn it. Now why? Because
yeah. No, I'll say the Vorcha, the Killing Vorcha, because I genuinely do think that is a tremendous design. It is. I mean, the Jeffries design is lightning in a bottle, but I do think the Vorcha is lightning in a bottle again, because it is stylistically, artistically, and like the angles are so different, but it's so clearly designed based on the other. But it does feel bigger and bulkier and stronger and more detail and more interesting shapes, honestly. I mean, it probably could have done with like a ball of some kind, but like a pointed ball at the front of the Vorcha's neck to lead in with the D7. That probably would have been the only thing, if you really want to link it in, rather than being so flat, because it is actually quite flat. The D7 has a bit more depth, not a lot, but a little bit. But it's trying to create the next D7, the next D7. Like, how do you do that without just ripping it off? But it's not. It is totally new and yet totally the same. And so I just think it's a tremendous design, actually. That is, I wish it was used more, because in a beautiful miniature made for TNG, but I guess it was prohibitively expensive. DS9 we got to see it quite a bit, but by that time they primarily used Birds of Prey, and then sort of some Negvar, but they sort of skipped over its time to shine. When it was introduced as Garon's new flagship, it's really opposing and strong, and it's like, oh, or not. It's like, oh. I mean, what do you think of that, and does that make sense that I would pick that?
It does, and that's an interesting ship, because yes, it's the next progression in a line of, or a lineage of ships as far as design goes, whereas the Daredevil is totally something unique and new, and we haven't seen the Romulans for however long.
Yes.
But we'd seen the Klingons
throughout
the movies,
although
with the Bird of Prey.
Although thanks to Discovery, we also didn't see them for all of the same time.
Yeah, well, anyway.
Retcon.
But yeah, it's a good ship to pick. There's something about it that's just elegant, mean, and still very Klingon. I mean, it's just a fantastic reimagining. It's that next evolution of the design, and it's something that's is iconic for sure. Even within the Klingon culture, just that shape has been around forever as far as ship design goes.
Yep.
So I really love that lineage, that pulling from the old stuff to create something totally new and totally. Even they changed the color to that green, and that worked well. I mean, you got the D7, which had like a grayish blue hull with some green elements for the actual studio model. Then it moved to like the Katinga, which is more of a gray silver with some
metallic
accents. Yeah. And then that kind of got dragged, those red elements, into this one.
When Kronos won, I think that was probably an influence. No, that would have been. They did the Spock episode at the same time after they'd filmed 6, but hadn't come out yet. But this was before that. for the Klingon Civil War, so I think this was before. Yes, this would have been, so ignore what I said. It doesn't come first. The Reds influenced Kronos 1, maybe. I don't know.
No, but they pulled those back into Kronos 1 to have that tie-in.
I don't think it was deliberate, but it is a tie-in.
But yeah, so anyway, fantastic design, well thought out, well executed, and it's one that really holds up, for sure. So, great choice, yeah. I never even really considered those as adversaries, though. They're more allies to the Federation. TNG.
Yeah, to be fair, yeah, except we only fight it like twice, ever, if that. Yeah, it obviously, I think we're all biased, and those of us that grew up on the shows as opposed to had some time before the shows and then whatever. So for me, like, I think of the Bird of Prey, I think of, as being a fast maneuverable ship. It can do these maneuvers. D7 is also maneuverable. It's not this big hulking warship. Vorcha I do think of as big, solid, much more solid, bigger warship with all its armour. I really like that. It feels like this command and control centre that is everything that the battleship lineage is, but it's actually bigger and stronger and better, and not better design, but just the fleet control ship that you would, as Chancellor, want to be on. Like, I think it has some of that presence that D7 doesn't have. Does that make sense?
Until the Negvar shows up, and then you want to step up to that.
I mean, the Negvar, what an amp up. Negvar's a really nice design.
Yeah.
We like Negvar, which does carry over a lot of the stuff from the D7. But yeah, I mean, the Deredex, I mean, that would have been my number one if you'd picked Vorcha as well. I would have swapped those over. Because just a tremendous...
Well, I was a toss-up between the Deredex and, like, the Keldon.
Keldon?
Keldon
Not Galore,
class,
then. You said maybe Keldon.
Yeah.
It is more interesting.
It is much more interesting. But we didn't get as much of a feel for it in TNG.
No.
So I kind of pulled away from that and went with the Deredex. But those are my two choices, so there you go.
It's a real shame they didn't do more fleet variety. And it's weird because they built all these ships for, like, Wolf 359, the destroyed ships. If they actually built real miniatures, they could have had, rather than the Excelsior every other week, it could have been these really cool, weird, but pick your favourite one. Could have appeared in other places, and like, the Keldon and other big ships. You're introducing very sort of... Oh, that was a DS9... No, it was first in Voyager, first in TNG, and then it was in DS9 a couple of times. Remember they chased...
Yeah, it was in DS9 more than TNG, I'm pretty sure.
But Cardassians were obviously more in DS9 than TNG. Anyway,
exactly.
Good choices, and who would win the fight? Because we know that the Deredex beats up can match a galaxy, but the Vorcha is also trying to match a galaxy.
I would say the Deredex, to be honest. I always pictured in my head the Deredex having plasma torpedoes. I thought that was cool. It should have been an evolution line from TOS weaponry.
Yeah.
Never used. They use, like, disruptor bolts and stuff like that.
It is quite.
So I like to think there's a secret plasma torpedo that they don't ever use unless
out of
they
the
really
deflector.
have to. Out of the deflector in the front that Andrew designed as a deflector, but everybody has stuff firing out of it. But yeah, that's something I always pictured in my head that they had and they never really used. And I know that's not the case, but when I was younger, that's what I assumed. It was just an evolutionary line from TOS. So
yeah,
but I would say that the Deredex would probably win in a fight between those two because the Vorcha is not even as big as the Galaxy class.
No, but it was designed for war and as the capital of an entire empire.
True.
When they've already seen the Deredexes, whereas the Enterprise D is big, it's powerful, but it's not designed for war. Combat, it can do fine, but an actual warship. That's one of those weird things. Like, you would assume the Klingons would want to, like, jump, leapfrog over things, and to be fair, if you're dedicating time and space to weapons, I mean, just putting 8 more torpedo banks. I mean, raw firepower does make a huge difference. If you saw Scimitar, I mean, just pummeling somebody with weapons, like, that was also a perfectly acceptable strategy, So whereas the Deredex, I always got the impression it was huge with a lot of power in its shields, and it's very limited armaments in terms of how many were supercharged because of the amount of power. Like, it didn't have. I mean, there are, like, phaserable turrets around it, but we didn't really get a sense of them. But it hasn't got, like, huge phaser grills that can just go in every direction and where are the torpedoes exactly. It's a bit of a weird one that way. Whereas Vorcha is, like, every cannon is, like, gonna fire on you and shoot you and blow you up. And You know what I mean? Like, I think it's not as easy as that question.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
Yes.
You would certainly surprise my ship by decloaking while we were inside your middle bit, and then just like tractor beam and then beam people on and just yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Surprise.
Anyway,
Yes. Sorry.
So who do you guys think would win in a fight between the two, and which one of us is right, or is there another TNG adversary that you think their ship is better?
I mean, were you even tempted to give a Borg cube?
No.
As the best villain.
No. I mean, it's totally overpowered and menacing and blah blah blah, but
iconic beyond belief, but it is just a
exactly
cube.
it doesn't.
Good.
Anyway,
good.
So I want to hear what you guys think. What's your favorite ship, and who would win in a fight between our two? Which of us is right? Looking forward to your comments as always. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification icon, hit like, and do all that good stuff because we're here every week with various stuff, and we got more podcasts and more what we would pick as far as our favorite things coming up. So check them out.
Yes. And support us on Patreon if you want to help us out and realise these lofty ambitions of guests and interviews and ship renders and cool things, and support us on a monthly basis if you can, or a one-time donation at Trekyards.com. Just go on the website, click the donate button, and give a little bit. It goes towards the production costs of this show, other shows, and us in general. And it lets us keep things coming to you
and
all
in the
the
meantime, check out the Facebook page as well, because discussions like this that we're doing right now happen all the time on there, and there's some great stuff. So it's a great community. Yep.
Crazy people.
So anyways, till next time, guys, I'm Captain Foley.
And I'm Commander Kungs. Bye, guys.